Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you for that. My name is Lakeisha Daniel Johnson, and I would like to welcome you on behalf of the Arts Committee to our Author Bootcamp Part 1. Today is going to be awesome, and I will now turn it over to our Chapter Vice President, Michelle R. Clark, for some words.
Good morning, everyone. Good Saturday morning. I am Michelle Clark, excuse me, and as the program chairman for Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Lambda Tau Omega Chapter, I am so pleased that you have joined us today for this excellent Author Bootcamp Part 1 workshop. Exemplifying excellence through sustainable service, it is our international program theme, but it is also our call to action. And the arts is one of our international program initiatives. And I'm really happy that we have our panelists and our moderator joining us this Saturday morning, as well as all of our special guests. The arts brings us joy. It helps us to express our values. It helps build bridges between cultures. And it also is a fundamental component of a healthy community, strengthening them socially, educationally, as well as economically. These benefits persist even in difficult social and economic times, such as COVID, right? It improves our mood, it changes the way we look at life, it provides different perspectives, and it also uplifts our individual well-being. I want to just identify that, writing a book will inspire you and it will inspire others. It will be a great experience in terms of providing an emotional and personal level that will express your imagination and creativity. With this workshop today, you'll find another reason, another goal beyond work and daily obligations and responsibilities. It will hopefully bring out the best part of you, your best ideas, giving you the chance to really create something that's good, really good content. Whether for personal motivations or business strategies, writing a book will always bring great and positive results into your life. You hopefully will encounter a new experience, and with a bit of luck, your book will be the first of very many. A very special thank you to the Arts Committee Chairman, Lakeisha Daniel Johnson, along with our co-chairman, Ciola Barnes, our panelists, our moderators, and the entire Arts Committee for their vision and their leadership. To our guests, we absolutely welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope that you'll come back again to Lambda Tau Omega Chapter events, and you can find us on LTOAKA.org. Have a great morning, and I hope that you enjoy Author Bootcamp number 1, which means that we're going to have a number 2. So we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much, Chairman Lakeisha.
Thank you very much for those words, Madam Vice President. So yes, we're definitely going to talk about inspiration for writing a book and where to get started, because each of us has a million stories within us. But I think one of the best places to start is to talk about some statistics of the book industry. There is so many different stories floating around that print is dead and that books are dying out. Well, from the statistics I found, that is totally not true. Print book sales have actually increased over the past 5 years. And we know that in this pandemic, when people can't go outside, they are turning to books. And that has definitely affected what is being created and what people are reading. And we also find that a lot of people still want to do print books, hardcover books, and not ebooks, which one would imagine be very popular. And we find that majority of adults still want to read a print book. And while they enjoy reading their news online, print books are their preference. So that is totally a reason for all of us to encourage the author within us. So let's see who we have with us today. Let's start. Who already has an idea for a book? Like, put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can see if we have our screens up like that. Who is already thinking about writing a book? Oh, I see lots of hands. Okay, so we've given it some thought. Who has already put a few thoughts on paper or written an outline or a page or the perfect one-liner? Yeah, I think we all have thinking, oh, that would be an awesome book, or this could be made into the next blockbuster movie. I know for me, often I feel like my dreams, if I could remember them, would make awesome books, but I can't remember them all. So that's my challenge. So definitely we're eager to hear and learn from the panelists today. So I think we should get started. And we are going to have the panelists introduced by committee chairperson, Cherie Hayward.
Thank you, Lakeisha. Good morning, everyone. I am extremely excited and honored to introduce to you today our illustrious panel of authors. Our panels will share their writing journeys and the steps they took to author magnificent literary books that will inspire, move, and uplift readers. First, I will introduce our facilitator. Our facilitator will lead us on a journey to open doors within our minds to create our best prose. Our facilitator today is Jacqueline J. Andrews. Jacqueline is an English professor at Governor State University. She is also the author of Heaven's Eyes, The Scandals of Macklin book series. Please join me in welcoming Jacqueline.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here.
Wonderful. Great to have you. Next, I have the honor of introducing Samuel L. Digby. He is the president and senior advisory consultant for Digby's Protection Group, LLC. And he is the author of Why You Need to Be the Man. Please join me in welcoming Samuel L. Digby.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Wonderful. We're so happy to have you. Next, I have the honor of introducing Loretta Adams. Loretta is the Assistant Superintendent and Chief Business Official for the Illinois State Board of Education. She is also the author of Physically Fit Kids Learn to Earn, Save, and Spend. Please join me in welcoming Loretta.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Lastly, I have the honor of introducing to you our dynamic duo, Dr. Michael Allen and Gilbert Allen, authors of the book Brotherly Love. Dr. Michael Allen is a principal for Oakton Elementary School in Chicago, Illinois. Gilbert Allen is a social worker who leverages his talents and skills by motivating and inspiring minority youth. Audience, I'm here to tell you, you are in for a treat today. We have a distinguished panel here to help you start or expand your writing journeys. All right, get ready. Here they come. I will now turn the program over to Jacqueline Andrews. Jacqueline.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's so great to see all of your faces today. One of the wonderful things that I loved when Lakeisha told me about this event is that so many of you signed up to be here this morning, because you probably already know this, but most people that you talk to will say that, oh, I want to write a book. I want to write a book, right? But they never put action behind it. So the fact that you're here this morning, that speaks volumes. So thank you for sharing your Saturday morning with us. It's going to be great. So first things first, what type of work do you plan to write? Because most people know that they want to write a book, but they may not be sure the type, as far as the type of book that they want to write. So you want to know the type of genre that you want to put out into the world, right? So I don't know about you, but most people I talk to want to share their personal stories. Okay. So you can do that by either writing a memoir, right? Or an autobiography. So a memoir is a book you want to write if you want to share a specific time in your life. Okay. So it could be a 2-year period, 4-year period, whatever have you. So President Barack Obama wrote A Promised Land, wonderful book, by the way. And it is a memoir because it focuses on his campaign and his first 4 years in the White House. So technically that is volume 1, right? Because he's supposed to release another book that details his second term. So I'm patiently waiting for that one. But so an autobiography actually is a book that you want to write about your life story, okay? Some people have lived very interesting lives. So from the time that they were born, right? They may have been born in, interesting circumstances or whatever have you. So you might want to tell that entire story from birth to childhood and into adulthood. So that's an autobiography. Or you might want to write a piece of fiction. So you want to ask yourself, is it a full-length novel, right? A story you may have started out with one character or supporting characters or whatever have you, or you might have an idea in your head. Some of you might want to write shorter pieces, right? A short story. Start out with just one, okay? So the key is to just taking that step. So if you come up with, or you might say, well, Jacqueline, I want to write more than one story. I may want to write a collection of short stories, which is awesome, okay? So if you can come up with different ideas and you can come up with at least maybe 7 short stories, you have a book. Ta-da, right? That's a whole book. But some of you may want to start a little bit slower. You may not want to write a short story or a collection of short stories, and you may not want to write a full-length novel. Then if that is you, then a novella is what you want to write. And I'm just going to type that in the chat here. A novella is a shorter work. It's shorter than a full-length novel, but it's longer than a short story. Okay, so if you fall somewhere in the middle of that, then a novella may be the way to go if you want to write fiction. But I know that most of you are probably itching to put out some good nonfiction into the world, right? So consider nonfiction this huge umbrella, okay? So within, under that umbrella, you have self-help, right? I'm a fan of self-help books. I'm a fan of inspirational books. So you may want to write a nonfiction book of essays, okay? Some of you may be essayists. So you want to just kind of consider these things. But I always say, first things first, you have to start somewhere. What do I mean by that? That means you have to start writing. You have to put pen to paper or sit down at the computer and just start typing, all right? Write every day, no matter how small it is. It can be one sentence, right? It can be a paragraph, but you want to start writing something every day. And then once you know the kind of work that you want to share with the world, your ideas will begin to flow, okay? Lakeisha says that she feels like she wants to write everything. And that's good. That's a wonderful place to be, okay? And then you'll find that once your ideas start to flow, and then you can ask yourself, why do I want to do this? So you want to know your why, okay? Know your why. What is your motivation, okay? Is it to leave a legacy? Because let's face it, once you write a book and you put your work out into the world, it's there for not just for you and your generation, for your children, your grandchildren. It will forever be there, okay? Or you may want to, your goal may be to write a book and have it adapted as a film or a TV series. You know, who doesn't like to binge a good TV series nowadays, right? So Margaret Atwood wrote this little book back in the 80s called The Handmaid's Tale. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that TV series that streams on Hulu, but it is phenomenal. Book is phenomenal, but the TV series just took off. So that just kind of goes to show that most people just didn't know who Margaret Atwood was, right? But once her work was adapted to the screen, small screen, everyone knows who Margaret Atwood is. So do you want to help someone, right? You might feel like you are a natural born teacher. I know that we probably have some educators in the room. Do you want to educate? You want to share your knowledge on a particular topic? These are all questions that you should ask so that you can come to your why, right? So what I want to do now is I want to hear from some of the panelists so that they can kind of share your why. I'll share mine quickly so I can get out of the way. And then I will let Samuel and Loretta and Dr. Allen and Gilbert Allen, I'll let them share some of their backstory. But I was doing genealogy about 20 years ago. Both my parents were born in 1935, rural Mississippi. And my grandfather lived to be 99 years old. And I had a chance to interview him, and I had a chance to interview a great aunt who was 103 at the time. She was a wealth of knowledge. She lived to be 108. But in doing this family research, I started finding out all kinds of stuff that I just did not know about my family and about my ancestors. And it just kind of made me curious, right? And I kind of grew up hearing some stories, from my parents' from their childhood, but it just really sparked this interest in me. So I knew that as a writer that I wanted to write about that time. Since they were both born in 1935, I wanted to write about a story set during that time. So that's pretty much how Heaven's Eyes was born. I created one character and sort of wrote the entire narrative around her. Oddly enough, the readers do not even meet this character until book 2. So that just goes to show you how you can create a character and work certain nuances to tell your story or to get your story told. So that's my story. So I'll hear from Samuel, Loretta, Dr. Allen, and Gilbert Allen if you want to share how you came to your why. Okay, I will call on you then. Samuel, you are the first person that I see, so go ahead.
Okay. I've always wanted to write a book. For me, it was about, legacy. I have a law enforcement background, and for years, it had bothered me to see the number of minority children, especially in my community, that were choosing a life that appeared to not have many options. So what I did was I come up with a way to take some spiritual principles that I was able to gather from my time growing up, my parents and my grandmother, and combine them with some secular leadership principles to come up with a theory to challenge men on what men need to do to get back into the lives of their children. And if they didn't have children, somebody else's. And so what I did was it took me years of writing. Like Jacqueline said earlier, sometimes you just have to write. And then one day came after about 7-8 years for me. I was able to look at pieces that I had wrote, and I put it together into a 10-chapter book, and I titled "Why You Need to Be the Man." And people say, well, what do you mean why you need to be the man? Especially women, right? And my reply to that was, you can't talk about what it means to be a man without recognizing contributions of women. So I really believe that. And as a result, I came up with the title, and it was, and that was it. And once I started writing, got those juices flowing, it was relatively easy, to do, and I enjoyed the process. So, my why was, to leave a legacy, not only for my daughter, for my community, to let them know that, my time spent on this earth was marked by doing, something that's going to outlive me. And so, that's pretty much my why. That was my conviction.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Samuel, for sharing that.
Mhm.
And his story is just a testament to the fact that it may not happen overnight, right? Or this could be your time, because it could have been something that has been sort of pressing on you for a long time, but now is the time, right? Thank you again, Samuel. Loretta.
Okay, good morning again, everyone. My why actually stemmed from working in the capacity that I work in. As an assistant superintendent for a school district, we have 11 schools, over 3,000 students. Majority of our students look like me. They're Black and brown students. A lot of them, I do a lot of work with the parents also. I've also served as 12 years as a township trustee in 12 different communities. So I've encountered a lot of people, a lot of women and children. So pretty much that's my focus. I meet a lot of women who, they go through divorce. I like to say life happens to them. So, sometimes life happens to all of us and it really shakes our foundation at the core. And sometimes, when I have these conversations with people, they really don't know how to go on. They don't have the basic financial literacy skills that they need. So now, here some of them are 30, 40, some even 50, they're starting all over and they've never really managed money before. They've not been in charge of their finances. Some of them have no idea about building wealth or even about retirement, things like that. So that's my motivation. That's really big for me. And also I grew up in extreme poverty. I didn't have those lessons either as a child. So it's so important to me seeing all the babies that I work with daily, that they receive this information early on. We all talk about Head Start and giving kids an early start. We also need to add in financial literacy. We can start teaching them how to earn, doing chores and just little things like that, planting these seeds early, how to save money, what to spend it on, how to invest money. The sooner we start, we build a stronger foundation. So later down the years, when life does happen to them, they don't have to start all over from zero. They have, I like to say, tools in the toolbox. So now they can just pull out whatever tool they need, but they have something to start with. So that's my biggest motivation. I love encouraging people, supporting them, but I want to empower people. That's the goal now. Empower people so that they can have their own skills to work with.
Thank you, Loretta. That is simply amazing. And just to let you know how much that is needed, I have a daughter, she's almost 9, and we started homeschooling her 2 years ago because she was going to this, private school, and we just felt like they couldn't meet her where she is. Well, I said all that to say that financial literacy is a part of her curriculum, because my husband and I felt that that was extremely important to teach them now. So you see how timely that is? So whatever you have, right, whatever you're passionate about, that's what you want to write about because it's needed. Like I said, Loretta is sharing her knowledge, right, with the world. Amazing. Thank you, Loretta. And now we'll hear from this dynamic duo, Dr. Michael Allen and his brother, Gilbert Allen.
Good morning, everyone. So we have sort of a collaborative why. I'll go first and kind of talk to you about sort of a technical piece of it. One of the things that we sort of recognize over the course of our life, from my perspective, at least as the big brother, and one of my favorite writers talks about this, James Baldwin, in his book, The Fire Next Time. For all the horrors that American Negroes go through, there's almost no language. So what we were trying to do early on, we had some clarity around this in the process. We wanted to do two things. Number one, to give language to adversity. and 2, to make hope tangible. And we are specifically focusing on young folks, youth, 5th through 8th graders. The leather thing, and this is sort of the educator in me that came out. We stumbled across this study in 2019 about New York public elementary schools, and we found out that despite having 85% of students of color, they were 5 times more likely to be exposed to white text. In fact, we knew that the students of color in that study were more exposed to books about animals than their own authentic cultures. So that helped us really dive into what we knew was important to giving them access to changing the narrative. So that was one piece, and I'll let Gilbert finish it.
Yeah, when I think back to my younger self, the why for me as it relates to brotherly love and coming up with our book was growing up in extreme poverty and struggling and seeing my community struggle. And at the brink in my life, taking a turn in which where either I could have ended up in a drug gang and having the vulnerability to reach out to my brother at the age of 14 years old, for him to take me in and be able to nurture some of the different things that I was missing, coming from being a byproduct of 2 parents that battle drug addiction. And my brother coming to pick me up and taking me to a different community, exposing me to different tools from an educational standpoint, putting me in therapy, really was the pillar of my life and saved my life. So brotherly love was really big for me and Michael to get out to the world, for us to be able to help kids or adults that may be struggling with mental health challenges or struggling with vulnerabilities, being able to express themselves mentally and emotionally. And that's really the why in terms of where brotherly love comes from.
Thank you, Dr. Allen and Mr. Allen. That's simply amazing, because I could go on and on about it, but just to put something like that out into the world to help our young Black boys is just, so needed, especially, when you look at the past 2 years, what has happened in this country, just to empower them. So if I was to think of one word when it comes to your book, Brotherly Love, I would just say empowerment. That is just amazing. Thank you both so much for sharing of yourselves and pouring into our young Black boys. That is just amazing. Okay, so now we are going to talk about something that you may or may not be aware of, and that is finding your first voice. Okay, finding your first voice, your motivation. Okay, so in finding your first voice, you want to think about what motivates you. Okay, you want to think about or ask yourself these questions: who or what kind of work am I drawn to the most? Right. So for you avid readers, and I tell my students this all the time, I've never met an avid reader who's also not a good writer. And I'll say that again, I have never met an avid reader, someone who reads all the time, who's also not a good writer, because the two go hand in hand. So if you're an avid reader and you're drawn to a particular type of literature, you're drawn to a particular type of genre, if you love poetry, right? You may have a vast appreciation for poetry, or you might be a poet, right? If you are drawn to fiction, chances are your first voice is fiction. If you're drawn to inspirational literature, you want something that's going to inspire you, something that's going to help you get up, help you get through, right, those difficult times in your life. So if those are the kinds of works that motivate you, then that's what you want to do to try to figure out what your first voice is. It took me a minute to find out what my first voice was. Now, of course, I write a bit of everything, but I had an appreciation for poetry. So I'll share this story. I had such an appreciation for poetry. I read, Emily Dickinson, Shakespeare, all these famous poets, young and old, from different backgrounds. And I was like, yes, that's it. I'm a poet, right? And I had taken these classes, as a graduate at large before I had actually applied to a graduate program. And I was like, I'm a poet. Let me get my poetry together. Yes, I'm going to do this. Right. And when I applied to the program as a poet, they were like, no. Okay. So what they told me is that you write extremely well, right? And so one of my former professors is that, reapply as an essayist, or she's like, I know you can write, girl, you can write some stories. So I reapplied and as a fiction writer, and of course got in. I don't share that story very often at all, but I chose to share it today because it's important for you to know your first voice. Okay. I found my first voice. I kind of had to hit my head against the wall a little bit, but I realized that I'm a natural fiction writer and an essayist, right? So you can have more than one voice, but your first voice, I'm a fiction writer. So that's what you want to do. So you may be a poet. Ask yourself, what kind of work am I drawn to? Am I drawn to poetry? Am I drawn to a book of essays? Because you might like James Baldwin. I have them here on my wall. Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes was a phenomenal poet, right? So I look at them every day because, I call them my literary ancestors, okay? Because I've been so inspired by them. And of course, Mama Toni, that's what writers call her, Toni Morrison, the late, great Toni Morrison. But you may be a fiction writer. So if you are a fiction writer, you want to read all of the great writers of fiction, right? Or you may be a playwright, okay? August Wilson, 2 words for you, August Wilson, hello. So we have him to thank for Fences, right? The play that was made into a movie that starred Denzel Washington and Viola Davis, and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. August Wilson, wonderful playwright. So you want to discover what your first voice is, okay? That is very important. And you can pretty much discover that by assessing the type of literature that you're drawn to. What kind of book will you pick up first? Okay. And I guarantee you, if you ask these panelists, they're probably drawn to the type of literature that they write. So that's generally how it goes, right? And I'm pretty sure that they will agree with me. So that's it. Now, let me just pause for a second and let you know, I see that, some people are typing in the chat box. If you have questions, we will have a Q&A toward the end, but we will move on. And we'll talk a little bit about narrowing your focus, okay? I always tell people, ask yourself what is relevant in your life and what's important to you. That should resonate because Loretta and both Dr. Allen and Gilbert Allen shared that, they grew up in poverty, and, that kind of thing kind of sticks with you. And so generally when that happens to people, they know from an early age, I have to turn this around some kind of way, right? When I get older, I have to turn this around. So that's what you want to do. You want to ask yourself, what's relevant to me? What has affected me in my life? And if I can keep someone else from going through that, right? Then I will have, to me, that is success. If you can put something out there in the world and help someone. And let's not forget Samuel. I mean, your book is so important, okay? So important because just talking about, what makes a real man, especially from the perspective of a Black man. And I think that it's important because the world tends to see, right, Black men in a certain light. And I think that if you, and I'm married to a Black man, okay? So I understand that, just, it can be a challenge sometimes just to show up, right? And moving through the world. I'm trying to think of his name. He wrote an essay, Black Men in Public Space. And I talk about this essay all the time. If you can think of his name, because I have this brain fog going on every now and then, probably TMI, but he wrote an essay called Black Men in Public Space. And he tells these accounts of when people started being afraid of him. Literally, he was 22 years old, and he was a grad student at the University of Chicago. And he shared his experience of the first time, Brent Staples, that's his name, came to me, Brent Staples. And the name of his essay is Black Men in Public Space. So I'm kind of, dancing around this and just trying to hit the point home of how important Samuel Digby's book is. But Staples talks about his experience and when he first realized that he can change the atmosphere, right, in a room or on a street just by walking down that street or just by showing up. And because he realized that the world views Black men in a certain light. But anyway, very important work. And so thank you. Yes, Lakeisha, Brent Staples, Black Men in Public Space, a must read. I have to tell you, must read. So all of these writers on the panel have put important work into the world. So asking yourself what's relevant, what's important to you, is definitely a great way to narrow your focus. I shared a little bit about this earlier, but I was doing genealogy, and I've always been obsessed with the past, not like reliving my past, but the past as in another time, another era. I am a huge fan of the golden era of Hollywood, movies made between 1939 and 1960, respectively. So I love a TV show that's set in the past. I love movies that are set in the past. So I just knew I wanted to write about this time, especially from a Black perspective. My parents grew up in the South, so I wanted to write about that time during the 1930s and 1940s, rural Mississippi. I wanted to write in dialect, Southern dialect, with my characters to speak that because I grew up hearing it, right? My parents, my aunts, my uncles, and Southern dialect is a sublanguage, right? A lot of people, I think, believe that people who speak, yes, we're on roaring 20s. Absolutely, love it. So I loved all of that. And I knew that whenever I put pen to paper and I started to write that, hands down, my characters would live during this time, during the 1930s and 1940s. Just a Harlem Renaissance. Yes, I hope I'm saying your name right, Doris. Harlem Renaissance, absolutely. You have to love the writers from the Harlem Renaissance was an entire movement, okay, of the arts. Talk about visual art, literature, philosophy, you name it. Some of my favorite writers are writers from that time. I named a couple of them already, but in addition to them, Countee Cullen, I've named Zora Neale Hurston, but Jessie Redmond Fawcett, James Weldon Johnson, just to name a few. Yes, Black arts movement. It was just a wonderful time. And so a few steps that every author should know. I want to give the panelists a chance to comment again before we go into our next segment. So if something came to your mind and you want to comment, feel free to do so now. If not, we'll move on. Or if you have, I see that people are commenting in the chat. That's wonderful. So, but if they don't have anything to say or chime in, we'll move on. But knowing your motivation is, I think, one of the keys to getting something down and getting something out. So a few steps that every author should take, okay? And I hope you're taking notes, okay? What are you reading? Who are your favorite authors, right? You wanna make sure that you read, okay? And I know that we talked about Lakeisha shares statistics on books and physical books. I'm one of those people. I still love the feel of a book in my hands. Although these days I'm definitely a fan of listening to books on Audible. Yeah, but there's nothing, Anastasia says, yes, definitely taking notes. But yes, I love the feel of a book. I love to turn the pages in a book, and I love to write in my book, okay? So when you read, you have to do something, what I call the 3 A's. You have to be an avid reader, okay? You have to be an active reader. That means that you want to annotate as you read, take notes, write in the margins of the book if it's yours, right? You don't want to be writing nobody else's book. If it's your book, okay? And you want to be an audible reader. Why an audible reader? What does this mean? That means you want to read certain passages aloud, okay? And the more you read, if you're an avid reader, you're training your eyes to know what looks right on paper. That's why I've never met an avid reader who's also not a good writer. So you're training your eyes to know what looks right on paper. And when you read aloud, if you're alone and something strikes you, or you're reading something and it resonates with you, read that aloud, read it a couple times, right? And then annotate, write notes. That's your conversation with that author, okay? So you're training your ears to know what sounds right, okay, in terms of the flow of the writing and the structure of it. So ask yourself who you're reading. You may be, if you're into inspirational books, you might be a TD Jakes fan, right? But again, you may be a fan of writers from different genres. But you're definitely the type of person, and you know that you're drawn to one particular writer or one particular type of genre, then you might want to start, maybe you'll have a revelation one day that, okay, I think I'm a poet, right? I love Nikki Giovanni. I think I might be a poet. Or I love Alice Walker's, poems. I might be a poet, right? So finding that out by just kind of assessing who you're reading, okay, and why you are reading their works. Doris says, I agree. I love the feel of a book in my hands, especially my Bible. It makes it more personal to me. Yes, absolutely. And just speaking of that, I think inspirational books are wonderful for those of you who do read the Bible or whatever have you, or whatever your belief system is. That's what I don't really call them religions. I call them belief systems, right? Whatever that may be for you, your belief system can inspire you to write. Okay. So who your favorite writers are. So that would actually, glad I took notes. Glad I prepared notes. So few steps, you want to take a note and write down and record who you're reading and who your favorite authors are. But you want to, when you start writing your book, or you think about writing a certain type of book, you want to make sure you research. We used to go back and forth with this in grad school about research, because some people believe, oh, I'm writing fiction, I'm making this stuff up, I don't need to do research, right? You do. Actually, you do. You need to do research. You probably need to do more research, because you have those readers who'll be like, nope, this was not happening back then, or nope, they wasn't doing this wasn't happening, nope, that wasn't even that was not even, they didn't even create that until 1960, child. No, you write it, so you have to do your research, right? Research, okay? That is key. So if you're writing fiction, you want to definitely research. Anything you're writing, you want to research. The authors that you're reading, find out something about their background, okay? You don't want to just, if you're drawn to these particular authors, you want to make sure that you find out what was important to them, okay? So, generally, and people used to say, write what you know. I don't necessarily tell students that anymore. You don't have to write what you know. And I think that's what made Toni Morrison such a phenomenal writer because, yes, she did write, she did do that, but she also said that she used to tell her students to kind of write outside of the box, write about characters or create characters that you may not have known personally, okay? Because that happens a lot with fiction writers. Our characters are sort of compilations of people that we may know or people we may have met over the years. Good historical fiction research, definitely, Amber, definitely historical fiction, because you want it to be accurate, right? Because people will call you on it. Just saying. So after you do that, also, if you decide to, you want to ask yourself if you want to self-publish or if you want to go the traditional route, right? I think now, the time that we live in now, self-publishing is extremely popular, okay? Because we have the power of social media on our side, right? We're just in a technological age in which we can get our work out there without the help of, a big publishing house. If that does happen for you, that is amazing. But so these are things that you want to ask yourself if you want to go the traditional publishing route. If you do decide to do that, you want to make sure that you do your research when it comes to that as well. Once you get something down on paper, because let's face it, these are your ideas, okay? These are your words, and you want to protect them. So you want to make sure that you register your work through the US Copyright Office, right? Because if you do not do that, someone can easily steal your ideas, okay? Probably has happened, especially in Hollywood, right? What movie was that? That I think a young lady had written it. What movie is that? With Lawrence Fishburne and Keanu Reeves. The movie is that, I think I can't, let me see. The Matrix. Thank you, Amber. The Matrix. So apparently a young lady said that she had actually written The Matrix, and the idea and the narrative was stolen from her. And, of course, the movie was made and whatever have you. And then she was kind of going back and forth, trying to secure her rights to the movie again. And it was a mess, but make sure that you do your due diligence. Okay, so we are going to, I want to know from you who your favorite writers are. And so you can put it right in the chat before we move on. Or what are you reading? If you are reading something right now, go ahead and put the name of the book that you're reading. Langston Hughes, Maya Angelou, yes. Two of my favorites. Yeah, just, don't be afraid, don't be scared. Put it in the chat, who you're reading. Is it difficult to register your work? No, absolutely, yes. Panelists, absolutely, you can put in the chat too what you're currently reading or the last book you read. All right. I'm going to address this question. Is it difficult to register your work? No, you can actually do that online now through the US Copyright Office. I'm going to see if I can share a link really quick, because I know that's how I register my works, but it's a pretty simple process. Chris, let me see, I love fiction, read a lot of short stories. Okay, mostly about werewolves. Okay, Ambria. While Justice Sleeps by Stacey Abrams. Okay, haven't cracked that one yet, but it's definitely on my list. The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. Sister Soldier. Oh, yes, Sister Soldier. Dave Ramsey, Clever Girl Finance. The Coldest Winter Ever is a great book. Okay, read it twice years ago, but yeah. The Chamber, John Grisham. Gotta love John Grisham. Yes. Okay, Gilbert says he's The Water Dancer by Coates. Okay. Yes, I love it. I love it. So just, just seeing these answers right now, just it kind of gives me I think it was, not sure who said that she's reading stories about werewolves. If you like the horror genre, I mean, Stephen King, of course, is one of the masters. Michael says, long time coming. Michael Eric Dyson. Oh, Michael Eric Dyson, phenomenal. See, yeah, there you go. Let's see. Yes, 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 yes. I enjoy podcasts. Yes, I also love podcasts. 101 essays that will change the way you think by Brian. Oh, that sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. Yes. You're the best. I just downloaded that book. You Are Your Best Thing, I think it's called, by Tarana Burke and Brene Brown. I think Brene Brown may be a household name, but Tarana Burke, for those of you who don't know, I mean, I'm not talking about, y'all know who Tarana Burke is. She actually started the Me Too movement years before, okay, it went viral. So yeah, she finally got her justice. But yes, You Are the Best Thing. Yes, that's on my list to read as well. So wonderful. It really, it definitely, I'll say, when you start looking at the type of books that you read, and I don't know who shared that she likes to read stories and books about werewolves, but there's a short story called The Wife's Story, by Ursula K. Gwynn, I believe. Just read that story. It's called The Wife's Story, and I'll put it here in the chat. And I believe it's by Ursula K. Gwynn. If I'm spelling her name right. Yes, and Bria, yes. So yeah, check that out. I think you'll like it. I think you'll like it since you like werewolf stories. But yes, that's wonderful. So as you can see, even the panelists here are drawn to the kinds of book. And this is something that Toni Morrison, she's known for saying, that she wanted to write the kind of books that she wanted to read, right? And she started, of course, back in the late 60s, early 70s, because she used to work for a publishing house in New York. But, and if that's you, think about that. If there is a book out there or books that you like, man, I really would love to read these kinds of books, and they're not out there, ding, 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 right? Write them, okay? Or write it. It may be the book. Books on the rapture, apocrypha, revelations, and other books on spiritual belief systems are some of my current focus areas. Yes, 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 Anastasia, thank you. Thank you all for sharing, because that's important. If you want to write a book, you have to read. You have to read. I can't tell you how important that is. You have to read. I always try to keep a book on my nightstand. Sometimes, depending on how busy my life is at the moment, it may take me a moment to get through it, but I keep a book or a few books on my nightstand. Okay, the Bible and other spiritual books. Absolutely, yes. From Pain to Love, by new authors, Naomi Wilma Scales and Marilyn Johnson Jordan. I like autobiographies, and this was written by my high school friend. I wonder when her story changed. Amazing, Valerie, thank you. I'm also a fan of memoirs and autobiographies. I think that genre is so important because I've read a lot of memoirs and autobiographies of celebrities and people of prominence, because I think that as a society, we feel like we know them, right? If we see them on screen, or if we're familiar with their music or whatever have you, right? But you don't truly know someone until they tell you their story, okay? So, and that's why I love memoirs. I just love getting to know into intricate details of someone's life. And I love the fact that they want to tell those stories. And it can really, memoirs and autobiographies can really inspire. Okay, anyone else want to share who they're reading? Okay, well, let's talk about your writing process, okay? How to create your writing space and discovering your writing process, all right? Discovering your writing process. What does that mean? And I'll share a little bit, and then we'll hear from our panelists so they can share that with you. My writing process started out one way, but kind of changed over the years. What do I mean by that? I had to discover that I have to write in complete silence. All right. Some people are inspired when they're listening to music, right? They have to listen to music, or they have to have something happening around them. I write in complete silence. Okay. That's when my ideas flow best. Any little thing that's, even music, and I'm a music lover, any little thing will kind of drown out those ideas. So I have to write in complete silence. When I was younger, I used to like to burn that midnight oil. I used to, crank out some good work at 2:00 in the morning. Not so. So I write best during the day, early in the morning. That's when my juices flow best, right? My ideas are just, abundant in the morning, during the day. So I tell my students this: when I host live sessions, I have to host them sort of earlier in the morning as opposed to late afternoon or evening, because by that time, and then doesn't really help that I have, she's getting older. She's almost 9, but that's been an experience. I've been working from home for a number of years. So I know a lot of you just kind of were thrown into that since the pandemic, but I've been kind of dealing with, trying to keep a child quiet and all of that stuff, and her coming in and, oh, look, mommy, I have a picture of her with black marker all over her face when she was about 2. And I was hosting a live session for one of my online classes. And she's like, look, mommy, I did my makeup. And she came and stood over my shoulder. My students thought it was hilarious, but I digress. Okay, so my writing process, one more tidbit. In my younger years, for whatever reason, I had to start out writing in longhand. So everything, I would have to take a physical pen, right, and put it to paper and write. Just for whatever reason, my ideas flowed better that way, as opposed to sitting down at the computer and typing. Okay. So I think I was discovering my writing process and how I wrote best. So that's what I did back then. I would have to sit down, get a notebook. I still take notes in notebooks now, but after becoming an experienced writer, I can now sit down at the computer and just type. But that was a process for me. So that was my writing process. So discovering your writing process. I can do both. I can either put pen to paper and my ideas will flow like that. Samuel said I write best during the early morning or darkness, 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. Wow. And Bria said she does the same thing. So it's different for everybody. Some people are night owls. And it's so funny too, because my daughter says that's when I'm like, girl, go to bed. She's like, Mom, I'm at my most creative at night. I'm like, if you don't go to bed. So she's an artist. She likes to write and she likes to paint and she likes to do these things and create. And so Cherie says, yes, early morning. So it may be different. Absolutely. So I'm going to let you hear from some panelists, and so that they can let you know their writing process, and because it's different for all of us. So I'm going to go left to right, how I see them on the screen. So Samuel, if you want to share with us.
Okay. Like I stated, my juices flow, the best during the midnight hours. I believe one of the reasons that's the case is because that's the time of morning I'm up. That's the time of morning I'm out here on the streets. I see what's going on. And essentially what I do is I'm writing about what I observe every night. I see firsthand what's happening to our Black men every night. For the past 2 decades, over 20 years, I've been blessed with the awesome opportunity to work directly with the community. And police officers have a lot of downtime, contrary to what you may see on TV, where it's always going from call to call to call. You actually have the opportunity to watch and observe people. Unfortunately, a lot of times police officers, they see people at their worst. And, I see exactly what's happening to our Black men, our Black boys in our communities. And quite often, I'd back up in a little area, get off to myself, and I'd start writing 15, 20 minutes at a time. I did that over a period of maybe 5 years. And all of a sudden I looked and I had a stack of papers. And I also used to record myself because I believe you learn so much about yourself that you don't realize. You record yourself for 30 days and you'd be surprised at the things that you see that you just take for granted. And you're able to go back and write that stuff down and say, oh my goodness, I didn't know I had those habits. So many habits that we have that we form that we don't even realize unless you write it down right then and there, or you record yourself. So I used to do a lot of that. And that helped me really recognize not only what was going on out here on the streets, but recognize something about me. So.
Yes, that's amazing. I still do that. I record ideas. That's wonderful. Thank you, Samuel, so much. Loretta.
Okay. So this will be a bit of encouragement for those of you who, sometimes it seems like you have ADHD or something. So that's kind of how it is for me. It's a whole process for me to get started. I'm telling you, I have to do a little yoga. I'll do a tree pose. I need to listen to some jazz music. Like I really have to set the tone just so I can really get focused. And then, and like Samuel was saying, it's an opportunity to learn yourself. So, if you need a snack, so that's going to be an interruption. So you want to make sure you create that space and bring your snacks right there. So you don't have to keep getting up, moving around, coming back, trying to remember where you left off. So that's a big thing for me. I try to dedicate a specific time, like evenings. I'm a morning person, but my mornings are all taken. So I try to dedicate evening time where I know I can really focus and stretch and do all the things I just mentioned. I can do that. And then I can say, all right, girls, sit down and get busy now. So, and I have to say that to myself. And then I'll write, and then I may start over, tweak it a little bit. But I will tell myself, okay, so you have this hour every Wednesday. You have to get something done. So even if it's 1 page or 2 pages, whatever it is, sometimes it may even just be a paragraph for me. But I stayed consistent. I stayed the course. So it took me a while, but I learned all that about me. I'm gonna need a snack. I may need an apple. I may need some juice or some water with lemon. So I had to cut out all of those distractions for myself. Just have everything sitting there before you get started so that you can just totally focus and have that space all set up in your papers and pens and highlighters, your laptop, whatever it is you need, so you can just, note it down right there so you can fully maximize the time that you allot for that purpose.
That's amazing. Yes, Dr. Joyce said that she's on the same page with you. Organization structure is a must. I think it's. I want to point out that she said that she has to get in the right mindset, right? Because a lot of times, our brains just get cluttered with life. And when it comes time for us to create, we do have to sort of, unpack a little bit and decompress. So that's very important. Thank you, Loretta, for sharing. All right, dynamic duo, Michael and Gilbert.
Yes, I guess I'll jump in first and try to be specific and practical. So the biggest thing that I think for me, having that research background with my doctorate, we just scripted conversations. So I really kind of brought up things that were crucial around the time period that we want to focus on for the book. And we talked and I just scripted at the same time. So we just did a lot of talking around key points. And I just captured exactly what Gilbert was saying and exactly what I was thinking at the same time, the overlaps and things like that. In terms of the carving out time piece, I think it's really, well, let me make sure I wrap up that point. It's really important just to give yourself time to think out loud, whether it may be that you prefer to record, and I think a couple of people have said that, but it may be that you need to write, physically write. The process of writing something down in a notebook may help jog your memory. So whatever that works for you. For me, I was still in that scripting phase for my doctor, so it was a natural transition. And then I also think a couple of folks have said this, but I think what we found to be valuable for us is not only just carving out time, because at the time Gilbert was newly married, having a second child, and I didn't have any kids and I wasn't married. So we tended to focus on coming to my house, and then we would sort of order food that was reminiscent of that time period. As we talked, it sort of jogged memories, it brought back nostalgia, it helped us not just carve out time, but authentic space to where we dove back into where we were in that experience. It was really a unique space, and it also gave us time. And it's tough to write with anybody, but it's really tough to write with your family. But it was cool because we were making time for each other in the process. Also, I thought it was really helpful for us to start and say, what are the 10 things that we think are defining moments about this experience for us collaboratively? It would have been different if I wrote it on my own around those 10 moments, and it would have been different if Gilbert wrote it on his own about those 10 defining periods. And then probably the hardest two pieces for us was patience itself. The book writing process isn't something it's not like writing a paper that you're turning in to your professor. It's a process to where information comes to you over time. And then after you get the information, you have to continue to break it down and ensure that it's what you want to say. So there were so many different points in the book writing process to where, because we're talking about our life story, we were very sensitive to family members like our sister. She's a Black woman, and we wanted to be careful about how we portrayed her in talking about our truth. So we went through 7 or 10 different iterations of how we wanted to communicate 2 sentences about her and who she was. The editing process really helped with that. And then the final piece I would probably say is, and Gilbert will probably elaborate on this, our book actually turned out, it started as one book, and then its second iteration is what actually became live. It was 2 different parts of the book, or 2 different versions of the book that became one, because of how we wanted to target a specific group of kids. So we originally wrote this modern, urban, progressive, contemporary, older places you'll go, with our own spin on our journey. And it was a picture on every page in our mind, and it was actually the last line of every sentence rhymed, much like older places you'll go. But that didn't fit what 5th through 8th graders wanted to read. They like chapter books, graphic novels, and things like that. So it morphed into a chapter book, but we were able to preserve quotes that fit in each chapter. But that was really elaborate and intricate process that took a lot of work. It would have been hard even on my own, but it was even more difficult because I could write whenever I felt like writing, but we had to figure out how to carve out that time collaboratively together.
Yeah, to add to that, it was a very interesting process for me. First off, to be writing a book with your older brother, and then to write a book with your older brother that raised you, was very different for me. And the biggest thing that I had learned was, first off, having patience for myself, which sprinkled over to me having patience for him, because we shared different perspectives and we had to learn how to compromise to put these things together, right? And then also, as it relates to the writing process myself, I'm more of a night owl. I've always been that way. I love to be up at night. That's where I'm more creative. So it was somewhat different and difficult for me to match different things as it relates to Michael's schedule and different things of that nature. But we ended up making it happen. But the most important thing that I learned throughout that process was different things about myself as it relates to writing, different things that I liked that got me like different music. I love neo soul music, so it's something I would put on specifically if I was doing some writing on my own. And sometimes even with Mike, even though Mike may like that kind of music, but may not, but he'll still sit there and like listen to me as we write, jot things down, take some notes, and different things of that nature. But the biggest thing that was very interesting for me with Michael was we were learning different things about each other too, right? Like there was different phases in our lives before I ever went to live with Michael, when he took me and took guardianship of me that he didn't even know about. So we're sitting there writing, and he like, did that happen? You know, I'm like, yeah, that really happened, you know? So we was just learning different things about each other throughout the writing process. So it was super interesting for us. And to be honest, it was really fun. Loved it.
That's amazing. Thank you, Dr. Allen and Gilbert. What I love about your story is that you mentioned the word work, Gilbert, because writing a book is work. But what's great about your story is that you were able to hold each other accountable, right? Because I'm pretty sure there were times when, you know, one or both of you may have been like, you know, man, I'm not in this today, right? But you were there to hold each other accountable. And I think that that is amazing. That's amazing. I wanted to mention something else. So I'm hearing different things, and I know there are different questions. How did you keep rolling with the ball and not get stuck with how you thought the process should go? I think, you know, I'll address that a little bit if someone on the panel would like to address that as well. I know I'm trying to be mindful of the time, but yeah, the process may change a little bit, but you just have to the key is to stick with it. It's to stick with it and not let it go. It's like this vision, right, that you have. You have to hold the vision there. You have to keep it there right in front of you. Okay, so moving on, because we are getting down to the timeline here. We can start talking about some of the key takeaways, all right? And I'll let the panelists share their key takeaways at this point, and then I'll add, if time permits, I'll add something to that. So we're gonna go in the same order again. So Samuel, what are some key takeaways that you'd like to leave with the attendees today?
Sometimes, at least in my experience, you know, we have a tendency, you know, as writers, it's not uncommon to talk to writers who say they've written several pieces of work and they've sat around for years. And I experienced that. I believe sometimes in order for something to grow, sometimes something has to die. And when my father passed away, as much as that hurt me, in 2008, all those pieces of paper that I wrote and I put up on the shelf, it came to life after and that was that got me going, because I say, okay, now is the time. So, you know, for me, writing, my book, Why You Need to Be the Man, I had written several things down over the years. Didn't do anything with it as far as publication was concerned until he passed away. And that did something to me to say, okay, now is your time. And so, that's what I took away, from that. And sometimes brilliance comes out of tragedy. And, and I accepted that. So.
Thank you, Samuel, for sharing that. All right, Loretta, key takeaways.
Okay. I would like to just remind you all that you have to remember that it's a process. And one thing that I usually share when I do these online groups that I have, I ask all the women in the group, make a commitment to yourself. So once you make that commitment to yourself, you're going to hold yourself accountable, and it's going to help you stay the course. So it doesn't have to be an overnight victory, So as you're working through the process, you create small timelines and deadlines for yourself. So by June 1st, I need to have this much done. By June 15th, I need to have this done. August 1st, this is when we go live. This is the real deal. So you set those deadlines, and what you have going on in your life. So how best to set those SMART goals and be realistic with the time frames that you set. And that'll help you, so when you start, you may feel a little discouraged or something. That's when you do the positive self-talk and just remind yourself, okay, no fire, flood, or blood. I can push that date back just a little bit, but you still hold yourself accountable to make sure you get it done. So, that's what I just want to remind you all that, we've all heard the saying, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So set these, create this timeline, stay the course, and make that commitment to yourself, and you will get it done. Celebrate your small victories along the way.
Yes, all of that, Loretta. Thank you so much. All right, Michael and Gilbert.
Yeah, for me, I would say there's 5 key areas. Number one, and some of them have come up, but I just want to drive them home on purpose. Embrace your own creativity. Your voice looks different than other people's. It's really important to read and study others to find your voice, though. You really have to make that a priority, even during the process of writing. You kind of have to make sure that you keep going back and forth to find out what your voice is. Third piece is get clear about your purpose for writing. It will help you share your story in the most impactful way. So a lot of times for me, writing is about getting out the emotions that I need to express at that time. That's to me more journaling, or that's free writing. But as we started to craft out this story, we had to really think about who we were talking to, which really was ourselves. We were trying to give information to ourselves earlier in life. And so when we got crystal clear about who we were writing to and what it looked like, it made everything flow much more smoothly. It is a tough process. It doesn't just happen overnight. Also remember your responsibility for, if you're gonna tell your own truth, and it includes your loved ones or family, you do have a responsibility to consider how your truth impacts them. That's a difficult piece. And telling your story isn't reality TV, it's your reality, and it may conflict with other people. So you have to take responsibility for understanding that and recognizing that's a difficult process. And the final piece that I would say sounds abstract, but to get from where you are now to getting the book published, you have to function under the mantra that you have to risk who you are right now for what you hope to become.
Yeah, and to add to that is the biggest thing that I feel like I learned was being able to share every part of myself, right? Learning how to get over my fears, so I can actually share this holistically with everybody, and then also one crucial point, which a lot of panelists already pretty much talked about this, is the time management, right? Like I learned that like time management was so crucial for me because of having a family, and balancing my kids, my wife, and all the different things that I got going on in my life. It was super crucial for us to be able to develop this book. And then I would say the third thing for me would be compromise, being able to compromise and be patient in that process. I like to call it a slow dance, right? When I first went into the process, right, I was like, hey, I was thinking I was about to get into doing some hip hop dancing, but that wasn't it. It was a slow, delicate dance that I had to learn, this process that we had to go through for us to be able to get this done.
Wow, I like that, a slow dance. that kind of leads to my key takeaways. I will just say, stay the course, because I won't lie, there will be times you want to give up, and you'll say, oh, well, you know, stay the course. The second thing is be intentional, okay, about the work you want to put out into the world. Be intentional. And number three, stay true to yourself. All right. Stay true to yourself. That means you want to write from a place of authenticity. Okay. It's wonderful to have role models, literary role models, and people you love, but stay true to your voice. That's why finding your voice and discovering your voice, your first voice, is so important, because you want to stay true to yourself. I heard James Baldwin say this in an interview one time, that he had to let go of that white gaze, right? That imaginary little white man on his shoulder. And he's writing like, oh my God, well, what are white people gonna think, you know? But no, you have to stay true to who you are. I think that, and that translates. Once you put your work out there into the world, that will translate. People can tell when you're not being true to yourself. So yeah, stay true to yourself. So that is it. Now, I did have a few questions. I don't know if I kept up with them all, but I'm not sure if Lakeisha wanted to address a few of them. But before we go ahead.
Hi, Jacqueline. I think we can definitely do the questions during the Q&A part. Okay. I am eager to give our attendees our homework assignment, because I'm excited.
Okay, good. Okay, so for your homework assignment, you want to try your best to choose a genre, okay? Choose a genre: poetry, nonfiction, fiction, whatever it is. Choose a genre, okay? Just write it down, whichever one comes up first. Say, okay, and then, you can kind of, play with that. Number two, I want you to ask yourself, who's your audience? When you write this book and you put this work out into the world, who do you have in mind? If it is an inspirational book or a memoir, who do you want to benefit the most from your words? Okay. So you want to know your audience or your readership. Okay. And you want to choose your genre. And then I want you to write one page report on why it's important for you to write this book. Okay. So I want you to give me one page, you can type it out, you can write it out or whatever have you, on why it's important for you to write this book. Okay. That's your homework. That is your homework assignment. So I'll say it again, choose your genre. Okay. Is it fiction? Is it nonfiction? Do you want to write a book of essays? Do you want to write short stories? Inspirational, self-help? So choose a genre and then ask yourself who your audience is. Okay. Who's your readership? And then I want you to write one page explaining why it's important for you to write this book. Okay. And with that, I will turn it back over to Cherie and Lakeisha. Thank you all so much for being attentive.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm seeing in the chat too, someone just says, where do we send our whys? I think right now we're going to keep our whys, and then because we plan to get together later this fall to have Author Bootcamp Part 2. So at that time, we can bring back all of this information and share it with each other and keep moving on forward on the journey together. I think today, this gave me, Samuel, you mentioned having all these different pieces of paper over the years that kind of gave me, okay, being a pack rat in a way, but I know I just gotta make sure I keep my papers in one spot and not all over the house. But I think we definitely have a lot of questions for our panel. I know that I've written some down. I know there were some in the chat. Leela, can you share some of the questions that you have been gathering for us? Leela and Kimberly, if you have any.
Sure, not a problem. One of the questions being how do you reset expectations during the writing process and not get distracted by that reset?
And Leela, I think we're having a hard time here. You sound a little bit like a robot. But I think one of those, was it how not to get distracted during the writing process? And you can put that rest of that in the chat. But Leela puts that in the chat. Authors, if you could share, how do you not get distracted? And also, people want to know, where can they find your works of art? So as you answer, can you please first by stating again the books or book that you have written, and then where can people find you? And then I'll start with Sam on my screen, if you don't mind,
Sam. Okay. I am, self-published. You can order, my book through, Amazon, or directly from the publishing company, Ex Libris. It's in Bloomingdale, Indiana. It's in some bookstores, but regardless of what bookstore you go to, if they don't have it, you can order it, and it takes usually about 3 or 4 days to get a hard copy. It comes in hardback as well as paper. So, it takes about 3 or 4 days. That's what I've been told. So it is available there.
And then Sam, how did you reset your expectations as you went through your writing process? Hearing you all talk, I thought I was ready to write a book, but then I know I'm not. But then I heard Loretta say positive words to yourself. So I'm like, I can still do this. I'm okay.
Well, sometimes you have to incorporate, or you have to know before you even start, at least it worked for me, that there are going to be some times where you may go through what's called, mental roadblock. That's okay. That's okay, because, you have to get up and walk away, do something else, have other hobbies. Me, I like to run. I like to, go to the gym and do different things like that. But which is why I always kept the recorder with me, because I could be in the middle of doing something very profound that had nothing to do with what I was writing about, and then I would see something and I had to immediately get it written down. So it's not about sitting in one spot for 3, 4, 5 hours, not having a clue what to write down. Sometimes I think you need to have other hobbies. You need to allow yourself to engage with other people and do other things. And then you'd be surprised at the things that you observe just out here in the environment, which will cause you to say, hey, you know what? Let me get that down. Let me record that. And you write it down, record it, do whatever it is you need to do. And you listen to it the next day. And you're like, wow. And if you listen to it throughout the week, you'll end up coming up with something totally different. And so I think that gets back to the focus portion of it, that, you can listen to yourself over a period of several times during the week. And every time you listen to yourself or you read something, you'll pull something out different. So just giving yourself time to, adjust to that and not become overzealous with the process, and it'll work out.
Great, thank you. Loretta, Michael, and Gilbert, did you have anything to add to that point? Because I totally want to hear everybody talk about the research they did in writing to youth. I know, Dr. Michael, you mentioned your schooling helps you know how to talk to that group. For the average person who doesn't, what would you all suggest to help you know how to actually give them material they're going to glean in and not just go over their heads?
Are you good with us jumping in?
Of course.
So I would say, the biggest thing that I think really helped us, it was really a stress test, probably about 60% of the way through the process, where when we were able to have an editor go through and look at our work, they started to push back on how our work was reaching who we said we wanted to touch. And that was it was really, actually the fact that I had the educational background, that worked to my disadvantage because it made me more stubborn during that process. It wasn't, I could see how what I brought to the table really came together at the end, but honestly, I don't think you have to be an expert or you have to have some type of writing background to get your story out there. I think when you find editors who they specialize in this, they do this, they'll actually take the integrity of your work and make it fit the audience that you're trying to target. You have to let them do their job. That was hard for me to do. It was easy for Gilbert. But that's the way that I would articulate it. Don't be misled by my experience that actually didn't really prepare me much for what most of the process was. It was the integrity of our work and our story that was really powerful. And I really had to let all the things that I learned about my formal training go to get there. I think the last thing I would add that no one has said yet, but I think Samuel was alluding to a different aspect of this, is we really are big on mindfulness, guided meditation, sometimes together, but sometimes separate. So we had to sometimes unplug and just get into the present moment and focus on the things we had control over and the things we didn't. We let that go. So it was really important to make space for quiet time and really focus on mindfulness. Again, the preferred method for us was guided meditation.
Yeah, so just to add to that, it was times where I had to jump in and be like, man, Mike, chill out. I don't think that worked, so, and it's funny that I like the fact that he was vulnerable around the fact of actually sharing that, because with all of the experience that he did have and brought to the table, it was times where I had to come to the table and be like, nah, I don't think we should do that. Let's think about this from a holistic standpoint for our audience, But then the second thing that I didn't think that anybody brought it up was a focus group, right? Having a focus group to be able to look at those materials, right? So then we kind of have a little bit of a gauge on, how the work is, and how is it reaching our audience? And do we want to tweak some things, or do we just want to stay true for what we have going on right at that moment? So.
Yeah, let me elaborate on the focus group so we're clear about that. Near the end of the process, we sort of had a version of the product, the book that we wanted to have out there before it went live, before we actually published it. We partnered with a couple of organizations and were able to get it into kids' hands and parents' hands and folks and see how they felt about it. We did ultimately tweak like aspects of the pictures. We refined a couple of aspects of how we told the story in chapters, but the focus group really helped us know if what we were intending to resonate with people really fit that before it was live, before the book was published and live. Good point.
That is awesome. Thank you. I'm learning more that the process is, while it is the same for everybody, meaning you have to write, it is very different for everybody. And in the chat, people are really eager to hear the title of your books. And so we've posted that again in the chat, each of the authors and their books, in case you want to go read them, because I know they were eager to hear their words and now read their words and read along with their words. Another question from Anastasia is, what is your first book to publish if you feel that you have multiple books and multiple audiences in you? Where do you start? And any of the panelists can feel free to jump in.
Okay, so I'll start first. That's a very good question, because my initial book, it was totally different. It was more of a self-help book for women. But then I also have I have a couple of groups called Degrees of Self-Preservation. And then I have another group called Physically Fit Women. So everything was geared around women starting out. And so that was actually the first book that I started working on. That book was, and still is, it's in progress. It's a lot of work. So what I did in order to keep my momentum going, I work with children every day, 3,200, I think 41 kids. So what a lot of the work that I was doing in the community, and I'm always teaching somebody and doing workshops and things like that. So what I did was, I'm looking at the demographics, because I also managed the I do all the finances also for the school district. So I'm looking at all the demographics and all of the income and all this information that I'm seeing on a regular basis. Well, why not start with children? Because the adults that I'm helping, you know, some of this information, had they received it early on as a child, they would be in a better position now. So, and I thought it was great. So it was so much easier to create the kids book first, get that book out. And it just gave me some momentum. It motivated me, it inspired me. And so now I'm still working on the other books, but this one was just a little bit easier. And it was, a lot of the information was already readily available to me. I had this information, I see it, you know, so that I use that to motivate me to get that out. And that's how Physically Fit Kids came about, because initially, you know, all of my groups are called Physically Fit Women. So now Physically Fit Kids stemmed from that, but it's just great to kind of build a strong foundation early on as kids. So.
Great. We'll go ahead and jump in. I would probably say we had a similar process as Loretta. We didn't necessarily have multiple books that we were writing, but when we targeted the first, so right now we have this book already live, and we're writing another version of it that's targeting young adults. So people who are wrapping up high school all the way into adulthood. It's just a more intricate version of the story, but we had the same process with how Loretta described. With we knew, number one, that we were trying to captivate a part of us that was at a certain phase of life, and so we wanted to share that same story to young folks at that same phase. Number one, but also I was strategic from a fiscal perspective around understanding that if we're going to test where we are, it's a lot more sustainable to be in a consistent place. Schools are going to always have kids; they're going to always need books, and so there was a more stable foundation in taking that risk. So we sort of arrived at that in part because of that reason. But now, as we're becoming more established, we can branch off. That was at least the story we told ourselves, and we're going to kind of go from that perspective. We also had this unique perspective around the book turned into something that there was no competitor with. So we had a book that tells a story to young folks in 55 pages in one sitting, but it could actually be spanned out to fit into several lessons. We didn't want to compete with another book that was on the market. We actually just wanted to tell our story on its own. The second book does compete with other books like that, like Stamped by Ibram and so many other folks. It fits into a category. We wanted to be in our own. We wanted to have our own voice at first. So hopefully that
That's very interesting. I love that you said the story we told ourselves. And again, going back to the positivity that, okay, we're going to choose this and we're going to attach a positive narrative and intent with it, because that brings returns. Yes. Samuel or Jacqueline, did you have anything to add to that particular question?
Well, yeah, I'll just jump right in. And it's funny. I think all of us are going to say something similar, because, you know, with my book, you know, I was writing it with the mindset of directing it to men, you know, Black men in particular, but men in general. But once I finished the process and I got it out there, I was getting invited to schools. Well, who are at schools? Young people. And because I was, self, published, I would take my books, I would take books with me, and the age group was probably like around 13 to 16. It was right up in there. And they would take the books, they would read them and then take them home and then give them to their parents. So, initially thinking about it, I'm thinking my message was directly going to men, but come to find out myself in an environment with a lot of young people, and indirectly, my book ended up going through them, getting to other men in the community, and it worked out, and and I'm grateful for that. So you can start out one way, and you can have this plan, but there's an old saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plan. Because we think we're going in one direction, and then all of a sudden we're back over here, and you're like, wow, I didn't see that one coming. And that's kind of how it was for me. I'm thinking I'm targeting men, which that's the end, that was the end result. And I end up coming involved more so with a bunch of teenagers, you know, young adults, those boys that's getting ready to make that transition. So, and I use that. I use that to get it out. Mhm.
Awesome. I'm loving hearing all of this. Yes, Jacqueline.
No, I didn't want to cut anyone off. That's a great question, because I think a lot of writers start off writing, because my first book was a memoir. It's unpublished. And I decided, well, it's based on my journals from when I was young. I kept a journal as a teenager in my early adult life. And I call it my reckless youth. And, I took some, wrong turns, as, a lot of people did. And my idea was to, okay, I want to help somebody else. If I can help, one young woman not, to go down this road. But I wanted, so I kind of wrote that book. It was very difficult to write because I had to relive a lot of those moments. And some of those moments were very painful moments. And so that's what I want to say for those of you who plan to write memoirs or plan to share parts of your life. Just remember that to do that, you have to relive some of those moments. Okay. So be prepared for that emotionally, right? Be prepared for that. But anyway, yes, that was the first book I wrote because I needed to kind of get that out. And then I turned to fiction because I found that was my first voice. So.
That is awesome. I'm definitely adding things. I'm like writing my why this is important now. And I get that for like 3 or 4 ideas and I'm adding into it. Initially when people think about writing a book, they think, oh, the writing it for money or whatever. But the idea of sharing my story, something I'm passionate about, sharing my knowledge, what I've learned with someone else to help them skip over a puddle or something like that is now just intoxicating the type of things I feel I could share with others. So I'm definitely excited, as I know the rest of us are. Are there any additional questions that anyone has? If you have them, you can either raise your hand with the raise your hand tool or put it in the chat. Amber, I see you raised your hand. I will. Okay, great. What's your question, Amber?
Hi, I just wanted to know a little bit more about that. And I think you spoke a little bit to it in terms of what did you do when you have this product? I know you guys mentioned, bringing in a focus group and having an editor, but just wanted to know a little bit more about the publishing process, or how do you connect to a publishing, or what is it like self-publishing versus connecting to an actual publishing company? Or is this something that we'll learn in part 2? Of author.
You're definitely right, Amber, that we're going to go a lot of detail into this in part 2. But if there's anything any of the panelists would like to say now to give Amber a little bit of info.
I would say it's probably not possible in the amount of time left, but it
is.
It's
that big? Okay.
There's pros and cons. Most of it you can Google search and it'll give you a good summary of it. I think we ultimately ended up going an independent or self-publishing route because we weren't established. I felt like I could have somewhat rode on the perspective that I brought to the table, but that would have overshadowed my brother's perspective. So we've intentionally focused on trying to build a brand. And our second book, we're going to go the traditional publishing company route. But we feel like we'll have leveraging power when we go to the table with whatever publishing company we go to now, as opposed to at the beginning. It's a lot of legwork that goes into that, but there are pros and cons both ways. The reality is, unless there's some established brand that one has, when you're going into the room to try to negotiate with a publishing company, you don't have much leverage. And so we just didn't want to take that risk this first time around.
Yes. Okay, I'll jump in too. Yeah, I agree with everything Mike and Gilbert said about that. I decided to go the self-publishing route initially. It costs a little more money, but I already knew how I was going to promote my book. I knew I was going to be doing workshops and speaking engagements. And I would say one thing about self-publishing is you own it all. You own everything. Understanding, that's the business side of it. And I spoke with many authors. Traditional publishing is great. Mine wasn't a financial incentive, but there's money to be made in selling books. And if you go the traditional route, which is great, the only issue is that once the traditional publisher, once you sign that contract, that's no longer your book. That's their book. They've paid you for it, and they can give you $100,000 for that book. They figured out how to make $1 million. So that's the only thing with traditional publishing. You may have something right now you're starting out that you're working on. You don't know what's going to happen. Remember, you might start out one way and end up someplace totally different. If you are self-published, it costs you a little more money and it costs you a little more time initially, but you may find out that going, that route initially, you may sell 20,000 books yourself. If you look at New York Times and USA, you know what they say? It's USA, New York Times best-selling author. It doesn't necessarily say best author. It says best-selling author. So at the end of the day, you'll have a situation where you can market your own product. You can decide the direction you want to go. You may decide to write a second of your book. If you no longer own the rights, you have to get permission from a traditional publishing company to make any changes to the first volume of your book. So, and that kind of did something to me. And I said, I'm going to pay the extra money to do it on my own.
Wow. There is going to be a lot to talk about in boot camp part 2. All right. So we got to make sure we all attend for that too. So you'll definitely find more information about that. So we'll move on from the questions. You can still feel free to put some in the chat if you think of new ones. I will now turn it over to the Arts Committee co-chairman, Ciola Barnes.
Thank you. You all have just done a phenomenal job of sharing with us experiences about writing and how to get started. And we're going to leave here with an assignment. We know that we need to stay the course. We need to be intentional, and we need to stay true to our voice. Our facilitators and authors, you did a fantastic job. On behalf of the Lambda Tau Omega chapter, the Arts Committee, we would like to thank you for your participation with us today. And we especially want to thank our facilitator, Jacqueline Andrews, Loretta, Samuel, who is the brother of our Sora Joyce, and also the brothers, Dr. Michael Elling and Gilbert Elling. You did a phenomenal job, and you have a story that really just needs to be shared with the entire world. So we really salute you on your accomplishments and your presentation here today. Later on, you will receive a certificate of appreciation. I see that they have it posted already. And this certificate reads Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Lambda Tau Omega, Certificate of Appreciation. This certificate is awarded to distinguished authors, panelists for Author Boot Camp 1 virtual event, and is awarded on the 22nd day of May 2021, presented by our President, Dr. Leah Hill, our Vice President, Michelle Clark, and our program chair, not program chair, our arts chair, Sora Lakeisha. And with that being said, all I can say is just thank you so much. We thoroughly enjoyed it, and we are looking forward to boot camp number 2. And now back to you, Sora Lakeisha.
Thank you very, very much, Sora Ciola. Again, we've had a wonderful time here today together, and we will definitely see you at Author Boot Camp 2. Hope you do your homework. I'm going to do mine. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.